everybody, welcome back. I hope you had a refreshing break. Welcome to this session on the current status of forest monitoring, where we will get an update both on the global picture, but also from 3 countries here on stage. Together with me on stage, I have Patricia from Paraguay, I have Peter from Kenya, and Agus Budi from our host country, Indonesia. And we also have Marieke from FAO. Before we dive into the topic of this session, I would really like to extend a big thank you to our hosts, the Indonesian government, who is welcoming us here in this beautiful island of Bali. Thank you so much for hosting us here. I think it offers the perfect context for our discussions here the coming few days. Hosting the GFOI Plenary offers the opportunity to get some extra spotlight on the work that you do here in Indonesia, which we heard about a little bit in the opening remarks from Ibu Haruni. And I'm sure that everybody here is just as excited as I am to learn more on the progress and the important work that you have done and achieved in Indonesia. So thank you for allowing us to come here and learn more of the work that you are doing. I think we're very much looking forward to learn of the progress that you made, but also of how you've tackled challenges. Because let's be honest, monitoring forests, it's not like a walk in the park. It's perhaps a bit more like a walk in a natural forest, where you have to tackle challenges and go a little bit up there or a little bit down there to move forward. And I think this underlines the importance of enjoying the work as we progress. Because it's about achieving and not just enjoying the fulfillment, but also the work moving forward. We have to appreciate the walk, not just the final destination that we're at. In a way, it reminds me a little bit about something that we do in Norway, where we have a system with cabins or chalets in the mountain, and you can spend your vacation walking from one chalet to the next, each day tackling a new trail. And the joy of reaching your day's destination after a long and strenuous walk is really wonderful and important to savor, because today's final destination is actually tomorrow's starting point. It's a bit like forest monitoring in that way. We have to build our efforts this year on what we achieved last year. And this underlines the importance of celebrating and appreciating all that we achieve every year, every week, I think. So, let's spend a little bit of time and appreciating and savoring what we have achieved. As we will explore over the days of this plenary, there is a marvel to the monitoring of forests. But now, let's go back to the classic MRV, RED+, measuring, reporting and verification of emissions and removals of greenhouse gases. RED+ MRV was the starting point for GFOI, and really a catalyst for all the work that's taken place. And the goal of this session is to get a status update on the recent developments. It's a useful metric for determining our collective progress in forest monitoring before we explore all the marvels of forest monitoring. I will therefore ask our colleague Marieke Sandker, the forestry officer and MRV specialist at the FAO, to give us a presentation on the developing MRV context and country progress. Please, Marieke, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Ellen. Good morning, everybody. Selamat pagi. So, I'm going to talk to you about the developing context of MRV, and, oh, I need to, I guess. No. Okay, I have slides. I can see them there, but I couldn't see them. Are they coming up? All right, so I'm going to talk to you about the developing context of MRV, and then I will end off the presentation with the, with the progress made by countries. So So I shouldn't take more than 10 minutes. We're first going to dive a little bit into the history of MRV. Then we're going to have a glance at looking at what lies ahead. And then, as promised, we will look at the progress that was made by countries. So for those of you that were at the South-South Exchange in November, you may have already seen this slide, which is now gone again. Oh, it's on the side, okay. Getting used to it. It's a bit like MRV with moving components. So MRV has seen a complex history, and a lot has happened over the past 10 plus years. So climate opportunities, climate finance opportunities have presented themselves, but then sometimes disappeared again. So for example, we've seen the Carbon Fund opening for early participants, but then it was closed, the pipeline closed at some point. Then we saw the Green Climate Fund coming in with a pilot program for results-based payments in 2017, but then in 2020 those funds were depleted, and they were followed by some years of insecurity on what would happen under the Green Climate Fund. Now eventually last year, we're very thankful that there is a new results-based payment window for the Green Climate Fund, but it also comes with a new scorecard. So also the requirements for MRV are sometimes changing. On the other hand, we've seen the carbon market, we've seen changes in prices with the price going up, then the Guardian article coming in, which wasn't really about jurisdictional red, it was about projects, but all the same, the price gets affected. A lot has happened over this time. So on the other hand, we've seen the Paris Agreement coming into place, so that then actually changed the context of REDD+, and made countries set targets and through the nationally determined contributions, for which progress is being measured in the biannual transparency report, which started last year with the enhanced transparency framework. So much has happened, and it's really complicated. We know also the global stocktake in 2023. We saw COP28 linking carbon and biodiversity. So countries working on MRV are really faced with an increasing level of complexity, and sometimes it may feel like the goalposts are shifting. But at the same time, we could also see this as growing opportunities. So if some of the carbon standards are not suitable for your country because perhaps you cannot transfer the title, then perhaps you have another opportunity. You can participate in the Green Climate Fund instead. So now let's look ahead. Is it getting any easier? Not really. We still see a very complex landscape that lies ahead with multiple reporting. The targets go beyond carbon and climate change mitigation. We also have the Convention of Biodiversity. We have a lot to keep track. We have a lot to report on. But we also have growing opportunities. So at COP30, now Brazil will be launching the Tropical Forest Forever facility. So for those countries that have tropical moist forest, perhaps they can build on the progress they made through REDD+. If they've managed to reduce their deforestation, they could now get additional finance. As mentioned before, COP28 is linking carbon and biodiversity. Now we've also seen the ART3 standard coming up with a beyond carbon certification, so also providing some value to biodiversity. So a lot of countries started off with forest monitoring mainly for REDD+, but then the Paris Agreement came along, and actually also the nationally determined contributions needed to be tracked. So this was then added for the monitoring. Then there was forest risk commodities that became gradually more important, and now forests also need to do monitoring for supply chains. Then there is the Convention on Biodiversity. Countries need to monitor the restoration targets. They need to monitor biodiversity, nature health, fire. And after COP30, some countries may be interested to also start monitoring for the TFFF. Now, ideally, all this monitoring comes from one national forest monitoring system. Now we will see that, all this monitoring and reporting for different purposes, there might be some changes between them. It's always difficult to be completely aligned. So supply chain and policy making, for example, that really relies on maps. But for carbon accounting, accurate estimates are really required, so often their sample-based estimates will be demanded. Now let's have a look at the country progress. So as Ellen already mentioned, REDD+ has been a bit of a catalyst in forest monitoring for countries. So to date, we see that 65 countries have reported a reference level to the UNFCCC. And you can see that these are countries coming from all the regions over the world. I've also put here a QR code with more information and more details on all the tracking of what these countries have reported on. So that means that 65 countries have developed some part or built on their national forest monitoring system. And the forest area that is covered by this system now adds up to 1.7 billion hectares of forest, which is more than 40% of the forest globally and more than 70% of the forests in developing countries. Now these 65 countries together, 24 of these 65 countries have subsequently reported emission reductions in the technical annex to the BOR or the BTR. And these 24 countries together have reported 14.5 billion tons of emission reductions. At the same time, there's 381 million tons of emission reductions reported to the Carbon Fund and our trees. So of this 1.7 billion hectares of forest covered with a reference level, approximately 0.9 billion hectares is tropical moist forest, which is more than 90% of the tropical moist forest in the world. And of the 65 countries, at least 53 countries have to some extent tropical moist forest. So here we see the situation where perhaps the progress built under REDD+ can now be applied and gives countries a head start to perhaps participate in the Tropical Forest Forever facility. So now let's have a look inside these submissions. And here I took the liberty to translate the REDD+ activities into the different carbon fluxes. And what we can see is that over time, gradually, countries have started covering more and more of these carbon fluxes. So a lot of progress is being made. Still, more than 90% of the emission reductions that have been reported come from reducing deforestation. However, if we look at the global carbon budget, the standing forests are a massive sink as well. So they absorb each year up to 20 to 30% of all the global anthropogenic CO2 emissions. Now, for these standing forests, considering it's a constant flux, it's difficult for REDD+ to really create a lot of carbon credits around those. So this, again, it's really nice and refreshing to have a payment for standing forest, as the TFFF is promising. Now let's look at the technological improvements. Here we are looking at just one aspect at the satellite imagery that countries have been using over time. So we can see that since the very start of the reporting, all countries have always built on Landsat, which really shows how important this source of imagery is. And especially for the historical periods, we really still rely on Landsat. But gradually, countries have been integrating, making advantage of higher resolution imagery that was available. And this then also allows us to get more accuracy and to see more. Now I will be ending my presentation. I just wanted to show this one slide of technological solutions. So these are technological solutions that FAO is providing to countries. And right now, over 90% of the reference levels have used one or several of these solutions, which are open source. And that's also important to get transparency in the reporting. Now with that, I want to hand it back to to Ellen, and we're very curious also to hear from the countries. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Marieke. That was a very nice update of the global picture. So thank you very much for providing that. And we will turn to our panel. But first, we will turn to you, to the audience, because I think we have a question for you. We have a Mentometer question, if I'm not mistaken, because we want to hear from you guys. What is the most important objective of your national forest monitoring system in general? I think if we can get it up on the screen. Yeah, if you use your phones and scan the QR code, and then you can answer the question, what is the most important objective of your national forest monitoring system or forest monitoring in general? And just use a brief answer of, say, 1, 2, 3, max 5 words. The idea is that we'll get a word cloud up here, and we'll get a sense of what you guys think before we let our 3 panelists dwell into these questions. I'm seeing lots of lights, but I'm not seeing a word cloud. Maybe we'll have to wait a little bit for the word cloud. Or is it coming? Here we go. So we are quite curious as to what you guys would answer to this question. We'll dive into our panelists in a minute, but I think we'd like to hear from the audience first. Here, sustainability, greenhouse gas estimation, resource assessment, NDCs and carbon market, land cover mapping. Wow, guys, this is great, thank you. Biodiversity. But sustainability seems to get quite a lot of, I'm not sure what the appropriate word is. I'm not sure, vote doesn't work, but resource assessment, forest change. Great. Keep it coming. This is really interesting. Perhaps our panelists will recognize some of these words when we get to them, to their answers. I think we'll move to the panelists. So today we have with us from our dear hosts, Agus Budi from Indonesia, and we have Mr. Peter Sirayo from Kenya, and we also have Ms. Patricia Insfrán from Paraguay. So let me first ask you, and I think we'll ask our hosts to answer first. So forest monitoring has seen quite a revolution through MRV for REDD+. And many countries were perhaps initially motivated by financial incentives for this work. But now, after all the years of work that has taken place, what is the most important objective of your national forest monitoring system in Indonesia? Pak Budi, please.
Thank you, Ellen. Yes, I agree also that financial incentive is a good motivation, but especially in our country, I think the most important objective is to provide transparent, accurate, credible, accountable, and comparable forest monitoring data, according or related to MRV for REDD+, of course. And currently, our national forest monitoring system, which we call Simontana, System Monitoring Hutan Nasional in Bahasa, serve as a critical foundation and infrastructure for the Indonesian government to quantitatively demonstrate and build international trust in forest monitoring, and also its connection to Indonesia's achievement in reducing emission from deforestation. Without valid data from Simontana, in Bahasa we call it Simontana, the MRV process and its international reporting, such as National Greenhouse Gas Emission Account, for instance, or FREL, or BTR, or others, will be unproceed. And claim of emission reduction will not be accepted. And Simontana is also essential for Indonesian government designing to make what we call more effective forest management, evaluating the success of government program also, such as we call rehabilitation, restoration, or forest and fire prevention, and environmental sustainability. And of course, the financial incentive which as Indonesian receive from the Red Plus Fund have been utilized for the development and utilization of the Simontana itself. And also right now, for the wider purposes. In addition, is to being used for instance, forest monitoring, incentive also used to establish Simontana as a key element in national development planning also. And also of course, the last one is the implementation of climate change activities. I think it's what we have done in Indonesia. Thank you, Ellen.
Thank you very much for that thoughtful answer. It's really interesting to hear how this system has multiple uses and really is used in a lot of various efforts. Peter, what about Kenya? What is the most important objective of your forest monitoring system now?
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Ellen, for having me here. Perhaps let me start by saying that it is often said that a tree doesn't move without the wind. The wind has been the global movement for climate action that really started here in Bali in 2007 when the world agreed on the Red Plus framework. And I'm really glad to be here in Bali where the Red Plus journey started. Yes, it is true that the forest monitoring for a very long time has been driven by financial incentives. And for this particular matter, Red Plus mechanism, result-based payments to be able to access those. But then that has been also in Kenya the driving objective of us doing the forest monitoring when we started the Red Plus journey in the year 2009. But then, over time, we've been able to have a change from that because now we have multifaceted objectives. In Kenya, we use forest monitoring for decision making. Kenya, 2 years ago, undertook monitoring to be able to assess the level at which we are in terms of tree cover and forest cover. And through that particular exercise, we were able to come up with a tree growing initiative that we are now targeting to be able to grow 15 billion trees by the year 2032. And for us to do that, then we'll be able to arrive at 30% tree cover. And therefore, forest monitoring for us will be able to assist us in order to track the progress in terms of how we are moving towards achieving that particular target. Secondly, we are using also forest monitoring for the purposes of better management of our forests. We need to understand that Kenya is one of the countries that if you look at Africa, there is a river, the longest river, I believe, in Africa, called the Nile River. And one of the sources of the Nile River is Lake Victoria. And the rivers that feed Lake Victoria, most of them do come from the Kenyan highlands. And one of the largest catchment area in Kenya, we call it the Mau Forest, really plays a role in terms of regulating the water flow that goes to the Lake Victoria Basin. And therefore, our forest monitoring to be able to ensure that we sustainably have water that flows to the Lake Victoria Basin, in terms of ensuring that the Mau and other forest ecosystems within Kenya are well managed. The monitoring aspect come in handy. We also utilize forest monitoring for purposes of policy implementation. We, as a country, have a law that requires us to be able to biannually report on our forest status report. And therefore, through forest monitoring, then we are able to get data and information that will be able to update the country on our progress in terms of forestry within the country. Again, every 5 years, we are supposed to, through the Forest Conservation and Management Act that we have as a country, we are supposed to do a forest resource assessment. And therefore, forest monitoring for us do have that, play that role to be able to do that assessment. Otherwise, we have various objectives that the forest monitoring play in our country, and those are just a few that I could mention. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. That was a very interesting, and also thank you for reminding us of the start of REDD+ here in Bali. It's really, I wouldn't say closing the circle, but in a way it's kind of nice. It feels nice that we're here in Bali too. Patricia, let's turn to you. So what about Paraguay? What is the most important, or the several important objectives of your national forest monitoring system now?
Thank you, Ellen. I will take this in Spanish, so you can switch to your... Yeah, exactly. Buenos días a todos. Sí, así como mencionaron mis copanelistas, en Paraguay el principal objetivo de nuestro Sistema Nacional de Monitoreo Forestal ya no se limita al cumplimiento de los requerimientos de red, sino que apunta a consolidar un sistema permanente, transparente, robusto, que apoye la toma de decisiones para la gestión forestal sostenible de los bosques. De hecho, ya ha sido reconocida legalmente a través de un decreto presidencial. Hoy tenemos incorporado el Sistema Nacional de Monitoreo Forestal como una dirección general dentro del Instituto Forestal Nacional. Entonces, pasó de ser esa herramienta para cumplir los compromisos internacionales a ser una herramienta nacional para generar información de la cobertura forestal. Y si bien el MRV fue un punto de partida muy importante, hoy el Sistema Nacional de Monitoreo Forestal tiene un alcance más amplio. Buscamos generar información confiable y actualizada sobre la dinámica de la cobertura forestal, sobre la dinámica de los incendios forestales que anualmente en nuestro país sufre, también sobre la deforestación y los cambios de uso, y una innovación que estamos realizando es tratar de asociar esos cambios de uso a las posibles causas. Con esta información obtenida de los satélites y las posibles causas, podemos orientar nuevas políticas públicas, fortalecer la gobernanza y garantizar las leyes. De hecho, hemos consolidado un sistema que hoy utiliza la información satelital como evidencia para aplicar sanciones a la legislación forestal. Esto implica apertura de sumarios, aplicación de multas. Entonces, ese es uno de los principales objetivos que tenemos como institución, hacer cumplir la legislación relacionada a las infracciones a la cobertura forestal. En resumen, el Sistema Nacional de Monitoreo Forestal pasó de ser un instrumento de reporte internacional a convertirse en una herramienta estratégica nacional para la gestión y la transparencia del sector forestal.
Thank you, Patricia. That was really interesting. Thank you for that answer. And in fact, it brings me to our next round of questions, because we heard now that there's been a development from something that sort of came from an international sphere and then moved to the national sphere. So I'm curious to learn more about the use at home in your countries. So, Agus, Budi, I would like to ask you if you can perhaps explain a little bit some examples for us on how you're using the information and knowledge from your forest monitoring system at home in Indonesia, and how you use it to guide policy development and policy implementation here in Indonesia. Thank you.
Thank you, Ellen. In Indonesian perspective, the data and information from a National Forest Monitoring System, Simontana, right now is particularly crucial when it comes to supporting evidence-based policy making. We call it supporting evidence-based policy making to promote more efficient, effective, equitable, and to ensure sustainable forest management. In details, Simontana F National Forest Monitoring System is also important component on what we call macro level planning. In Indonesia, we have a national medium-term development, and also we have national forestry plan. And our Simontana is changing the way Indonesian government develops, also changing the way Indonesian executes, assessing forestry policies by shifting from presumption to data-driven methodologies. So, the guarantees that economics, social, and development goals, such as in our country, usually we have infrastructure, energy, and also what we call food security, are in line with national climate pledge and environmental carrying capacity. I think the important is on that. And also the government, by using that, is also can design the best spatial planning. For instance, we have in Indonesia what we call tenure disputes, land tenure dispute. We can settle it by using that. And also we have what we call social forestry area, and also land object of agrarian reform, how to solve the dispute between the government and the local people. And also assist the government in identifying critical lands to provide more priority location for forest and land rehabilitation program. Because combating deforestation is also in another way, we have to make more planting and doing reforestation to combating deforestation also. Our data right now, the data and information is includes timber potential. Also, we have non-timber product. We have also data on what we call environmental services that makes our government will easy to increase non-tax state revenue. We call it in bahasa penerimaan negara bukan pajak. Without endangering forest ecosystem and management. I think that, yeah, right now we know that the implementation of Montana and FMS is also still what we call facing challenges also, becoming to be more transparent, becoming to be more accurate, comprehensive, reliable, and comparable information system, including because you know Indonesia is very wide. The size of Indonesian territory is very wide, and also we have issues on forest management planning, financial resources, human resources, and also MRV reporting, and so on and so on. I think that's all, Ellen. Thank you.
Thank you. That's a very interesting answer. I have to say, I really thought it was interesting when you pointed to transparency and to dispute settlement, because they are perhaps some concepts that we don't normally think of in our context of measuring and reporting emissions, etc. But these are very interesting use cases. So I'd like to turn to Peter, because you talked about restoration and ensuring ecosystem function and the hydrological cycle, that the forest monitoring system was helpful in that regard, and the efforts that the Kenyan government is doing. But are there any other examples that you could share with us on how Kenya is using the information and knowledge from the forest monitoring system also to develop and implement policies in your country? Thank you.
Thank you, Ellen. Let me start by saying we are now upgrading our national forest monitoring system as Kenya, and our national forest monitoring system is there to serve two purposes. One is the data management function, but also the monitoring function that we've been talking about here. Now, apart from providing data for international reporting, as alluded to earlier on by Marieke, which is actually the process of getting data for purposes of greenhouse gas inventory that is now mandatory after every 2 years, in terms of tracking our NDC targets to 2030 and beyond, in terms of setting and our forest reference level and being able to see the results. And for this, I think I want to thank FAO through the Aim for Forest project that is now assisting us to be able to come up with comprehensive data to be able to update our forest reference level. Earlier on, we had submitted our forest reference level in 2020, but now, because of the dynamics that are there, things that are changing in the carbon market space, then we are now updating it, thanks to FAO for the support. Now, but further to that, we are now utilizing data from our national forest monitoring system to be able to do what we call natural capital accounting. In Kenya, the natural resources have not been properly accounted for in our statistics. We are now working with the Kenya National Bureau of Statistics to be able to see that the figure that we are now having of the contribution from the sector of 3.6% to the GDP is actually a figure that is not a true reflection of what the sector contributes. And therefore, we want to see how we can improve on that. And therefore, our NFMS serves that particular purpose. We are now also coming up with what we call a sustainability-linked financing framework that will be able to assist us in issuing either bonds or loans, specifically targeting reducing deforestation rates and forest degradation rates within the country, but also looking at how we can also benefit from our restoration agenda that is now big within the country. Lastly, we are also utilizing our NFMS to be able to meet the requirements of EUDR in terms of commodity monitoring for coffee. You are all aware that I think there is a conversation that is there that requires coffee producing countries to be able to confirm that the areas that the coffee is coming from 31st December I mean from 2021, then there should not be areas that were deforested. And we are now undertaking an exercise supporting the agriculture sector to be able to meet those requirements. And that particular data is coming from our National Forest Monitoring System. And last but not the least, apart from knowing where and why forest loss is happening in Kenya, we are also working with communities to be able to ensure that it is not only the government that actually does the monitoring, but we are also integrating community-based monitoring in terms of citizen science to be able to see that they report to us what is happening in terms of the illegal activities that are happening in our forests. So data from NFMS really assists in terms of enforcement and patrolling of our forests. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter, for that thorough answer. I think what you touched upon there when you mentioned the natural capital accounting is something that a lot of us are embarking on these days, and which poses a challenge, I dare say, for a lot of countries, because it's not so easy. So I'm curious to learn more about that at a later point in time. Patricia, I'll turn to you. You offered us some examples in your previous answer about fire monitoring, but also law enforcement. But are there any other examples that you'd like to share with us on how you're using the information and knowledge from your forest monitoring system at home in your country, and how you use it to guide policy development and policy implementation?
Sí, Elem, de hecho, la información generada por el sistema se utiliza para para respaldar diversas tomas de decisiones y también como base para generar nuevas normativas. Ya mencioné lo de aplicar sanciones por deforestación ilegal detectada. La información del sistema se usa como evidencia, pero también quisiera mencionar nuestro Plan Nacional de Restauración, que ya el país ha logrado generar un borrador y establecer como áreas prioritarias para la restauración, áreas que fueron deforestadas previamente dentro de áreas protegidas, dentro de los bosques protectores de cauces hídricos. Es otro ejemplo de cómo se están utilizando los datos generados por el sistema. También el manejo integral de fuego, las estrategias para afrontar las emergencias generadas por los incendios forestales, y también para proveer información a otras instituciones del Estado o otros actores de la sociedad en Paraguay. Desde el año pasado hemos logrado publicar los datos del Sistema Nacional en portales web accesible a la ciudadanía. Entonces, hemos dado un paso más, no solamente escribir los datos del monitoreo en PDF, sino hacerlo de forma interactiva para que las personas puedan ver su área de interés, puedan obtener información tanto de los cambios de uso del bosque. Tenemos actualizaciones diarias de focos de calor, focos de incendios, el riesgo de las áreas que fueron observadas que fueron quemadas. Son ejemplos de cómo estamos usando los datos del sistema. También, obviamente, para los requerimientos y cumplimientos de normativas como las ANS y demás compromisos que tenemos a nivel internacional como país.
Thank you, Patricia, for that very interesting answer. I think we're now going to turn a little bit to the future, because as I alluded to at the start of this session, we have achieved a lot, but there is also more work going forward. And though forest monitoring systems are up and running, developments in the world means that we need to we're facing new challenges and also new complexities, such as AI, which is posing both an opportunity, but perhaps also gives us some new challenges, I think is the word we use, to tackle. So I'd like to ask you, and I think I'll take the liberty to start with Peter, because I know that Kenya is doing some interesting things with AI. I'd like to hear a little bit more about how you are working to improve your national forest monitoring system. Perhaps you can share something about your experiences working with AI. And I'd be so bold as to encourage you to share some reflections both on the technical aspects of work going forward, but also on the interaction between forest monitoring and society with keywords like transparency and public information. Peter, will you please share some reflections on this? Thank you.
Thank you, Ellen. Perhaps all of us do understand that in aspects of coming up with a forest cover for a particular country, then it is easier. But when it comes to, say, assessing tree cover, I don't know how many of us have been able to do that. And as in Kenya, as I already mentioned, we are now working towards attainment of 30% tree cover by 2032. Now, for us to assess the progress of the tree growing initiatives, because we are required to not only plant, but grow 15 billion trees in a degraded area of around 10.6 million hectares by 2032. So for us to be able to assess the progress then, we need to know some of the methodologies that will be able to assist us to monitor the tree growing initiatives. Perhaps using the remote sensing technologies, for those of us who are RS experts and forestry experts, you understand that when you grow a tree today, when you plant a tree, you'll have to wait 3-4 years for that particular tree to be captured by a satellite imagery. But in between, you may not know what is happening unless you visit there and be able to see. So we are trying to come up with methodologies to be able to assess our tree growing initiatives. And we are using AI together with drone imageries to be able to see, come up with a model that will be able to assist us assess the tree cover for the country. But not only assessing tree cover, but being able to monitor actually the new restoration areas within the country. And we are utilizing drone, as I had mentioned, but we are also using super resolution images by way of training the AI models to be able to use both Sentinel, which is a medium resolution imagery, and high resolution imageries, and be able to come up with a model to assist us in that. But further to that is, apart from AI, we are also utilizing new methodologies, advanced methodologies in terms of us monitoring our forests. And one of the things that we are also working on is on fire monitoring, where we are now working to see that we are piloting certain parts of the country so that we put up their masks, but then masks that are having sensors that will be able to detect. In case a smoke just happens within a forest, then it can detect, and then it sends a signal to the headquarter. The headquarter then sends another signal to the field office, and by that then we are able to, if it is fire that is just starting, then we are able to go and suppress very fast. So that is something that we are also doing. But as I already mentioned, we are also working with communities, and we are adopting what we are calling near real-time forest alert system to be able to assess the illegal activities that are happening within our forest. Again, that one utilizes alerts, but then we have trained our, not only our forest rangers, but also community scouts and actual community members within our forest, because we do co-manage the forest with our communities to be able to, using citizen science then to report the illegal activities that are happening. So in a nutshell, the improved technology is really transforming how we are now monitoring our forest. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. That was a very interesting answer, and I thought it was very nicely explained how restoration perhaps needs to be monitored differently, and we need to think a little bit differently when it comes to restoration areas, to deforestation areas. And I also really appreciate the way you explained how local communities can be engaged, also both in monitoring but also policy implementation. So I'd like to turn to you, Patricia, for the question on further work and improvements in the forest monitoring system. What are you working on improving them and developing the system?
Sí, justamente ayer estábamos en una reunión hablando de cuáles son nuestros desafíos y nuestras prioridades en un futuro cercano para continuar generando información dentro del Sistema Nacional de Monitoreo Forestal, y hablábamos no solamente para el caso de Paraguay, sino también otros países, de la integración de los datos, tanto de los datos satelitales como de los datos de campo del Inventario Forestal Nacional, cómo hacemos para integrar esta información y complementar aún más la información generada a partir de estos dos componentes muy importantes de nuestro sistema. También hablando un poco de lo que mencionaba Peter, de las nuevas tecnologías. Siempre es un desafío incluir nuevas tecnologías dentro de nuestro sistema para buscar continuar generando la información y reducir las incertidumbres asociadas a este tipo de información, ya que es bastante delicado porque finalmente se utilizan para los compromisos o también para las regulaciones y legislaciones en los países. Entonces también hablamos de estos desafíos relacionados a la incorporación de nuevas tecnologías. IA es una de ellas, pero también nosotros venimos utilizando un poco de Machine Learning ya para tratar de automatizar algunos procesos, detección de cambios, detección o sea, las clasificaciones de los mapas que venimos haciendo, pero seguir mejorando y seguirle un poco el ritmo a todo lo que es el desarrollo a nivel global de la implementación de nuestras nuevas tecnologías es un desafío. También tenemos otras áreas de desafío, tanto desde cuestiones políticas como de cuestiones técnicas relacionadas al monitoreo de la degradación forestal, ya que no hemos aún como país definido un concepto sobre qué es degradación para nosotros y los bosques en Paraguay. Entonces tenemos eso como materia pendiente. Y siempre el fortalecimiento de las capacidades técnicas dentro del equipo. Es un desafío seguir el ritmo tanto a nuevas tecnologías, nuevos descubrimientos científicos y capacitar al equipo y a nosotros para poder implementarlo y seguir generando información confiable.
Thank you, Patricia. And also thank you for both saying degradation, which I think is a challenge for a lot of countries. It is difficult to measure and it's so dependent on definition. but also for pointing out that it requires a lot of capacity and resources to both run a system and to continue to develop and improve it at the same time. I think that's an important reminder. So finally, I'd like to turn to Budi, our hosts. How are you working to improve your national forest monitoring system? And are there any particular points you'd like to share with us regarding use of new technologies?
Thank you, Ellen. I think we should be more investing our resources in what we call human resources development. Because right now the technology is increasing so fast, and also artificial intelligence, machine learning is already a lot of open source. And on our Ministry of Forestry, currently we already conduct the use of AI since 2 years ago, 2023. We have doing 3 or 4 training courses, special, the use of AI, how to use the algorithm, put it into machine learning, the use of AI, to see whether the satellite imagery converted into 23 classes in Indonesia. So and also for what we call early warning deforestation alert. So right now, currently we are providing the information to our minister where and when the deforestation is happen every 2 weeks. Why the period is very short, 2 weeks? Because we are currently using the data satellite fusion from several suppliers that we could conclude it every 2 weeks to provide the information to our minister where especially illegal deforestation happens. So if we call Patricia mentioned about we call law enforcement, for instance, sending the patrol like Peter says, and we are giving good background data information to our colleagues to do the action in the field. So I think it's good for us the implementation of AI, especially in our jobs, yeah, and it will be more and more significant in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. I think that's a very interesting use case, and I like how you ended by saying that it will be more significant even in the future. I think that's going to be true for a lot of uses, but also reflecting on what we heard from Patricia, that this is a process and it also needs some reflections to both implement and use. It's not just something that you can deploy and then not think more about it. And with that, I think I'd like to thank Marieke for the presentation and our 3 panelists for sharing their thoughts and insights. Thank you very much. And I see Tom standing here. It looks like he's going to give us some important information as well. But first, can I just say a big thank you to our participants.
And thank you also to Ellen for the fantastic moderation. So thank you, Ellen. That was wonderful. Okay, now it is lunchtime. I'm sure there are some hungry bellies. I encourage you all during the lunch break, please go and take a look at the exhibition booths. We have 10 of them, so please, I challenge you all to try and visit every booth at least once over the next 3 days. And the other challenge for lunchtime is to introduce yourself to someone new as well that you didn't meet this morning, okay? So one more person. On the way out of the room, please stop by the interpretation booths and give the team a wave, making sure everybody can be understood. Much appreciated if you can thank that, and the AV team at the back of the room as well. We'll be starting again at 1 o'clock with a fascinating conversation across forest monitoring forums. So please be back in the room by 1. And thank you again for the very fascinating updates from the country representatives. Wonderful moderation from Alan and the great update from Marieke. So thank you, enjoy lunch, and we'll see you at 1.